just be me filming you, but
Oh
but
yeah, I was
it's
gonna.
all good. I mean, yeah, I want you to have something to post, but uh let's make it more about you than about me, since we're limited on time. Do you want to restart, press record or whatnot,
Sure.
or I don't know how. I'm really dumb when it comes to this sort of thing. So we're here in a pretty small walk-in closet. It's like there's the door. Here's me. My wife, Wei, has converted this into a studio where she records little stories for children, to be posted on Shimalaya, which is a Chinese, sort of audio website. It's an app, and she's got like dozens of followers. I'm not sure how many, but it's not in the thousands certainly. Um, but yeah, and we have Hollis here,
What up?
who I have who I met through Lucky Chaos, and yeah, he's an actor and writer and director and
Stuff.
kung fu master. No,
I
is that right? I don't.
wouldn't say master, but yeah, I do. I know a bunch of martial arts and stuff, kickboxing, kung fu, Muay Thai,
Uh huh.
jiu-jitsu.
Uh
I guess we
huh.
could just use this. Actually, I'm tripping.
Is
Cool.
that record? Does that thing by itself just record stuff?
Oh yeah, it's pretty cool. It can record stuff by itself. It's a field recorder,
Mm-hmm.
so reporters will use it sometimes on location,
Yeah, let's
or
just
you
use. We can
can,
just use that.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interface, so then you can put like a better mic in there. It'll be like super clear. But yeah, this is good. Dual. Cool.
I think a lot. There's a lot more interest, from like on the part of Asians on, like, right now. I think on the part of Asians regarding, like, yeah, I think there's a lot more interest on the part of Asians in regarding Black Asian relations right now
Yeah.
than anyways. There's a lot of interest, I think. um yeah, because a lot of people are like talking about all the violence that's occurred and stuff, and it's like, I don't know, it's yeah, it's become a political thing. So, but anyways, um so yeah, are we recording right now?
hmm
Oh, okay. Is this thing recording?
Um. Oh no, it's just flashing. I thought I pressed it. Oh, it's in Chinese. All right, let me just try to go off of the.
Oh, it's in Chinese. Well, it's okay, because I can't read it. I'm a bad Chinese. I don't know how to read Chinese. It was my first language. I don't know how to read any of it. I went to college and studied Chinese for like 3 years. I can't remember how to read hardly any of it.
Hey, speaking though, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's cool because it is it's a weird language, and when people hear it, they're like, "Wow, it's so."
It sounds very tonal. Like I will admit, it's probably the hardest for me to try to imitate with the dialects. Between that and well, just anything else, Russian or something else. Yeah.
It is
Okay.
tonal. Yeah, it's there's four tones,
Oh wow.
so you can say one word. You can say ma. You can say one syllable in four different ways, and it'll mean four different things. At least four different things. Like ma 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 ma.
Wow.
So that means uh, mother,
Okay, it's recording.
ma, ma. I don't know what ma means. Oh, I think that means numb. Ma
Ma.
means horse.
Huh.
And then ma means to
Ma.
scold.
Ma. Ma. I guess in a way that's kind of like I hear that from a lot of my foreign friends that English is one of their hardest languages to learn because of all the double meanings to things. So
Mm.
maybe it's, and I guess in a sense it's kind of tonal because you could be like, "Oh, that's sick," or "I'm feeling sick right now," or
Uh
sick. You know what I mean? So it's like
huh.
that's sick, or I'm feeling sick, or I'm sick right now. Like to somebody who didn't know, I guess the slang or the whatever they might be like. But he said sick and he looked happy, but then he's sick. I don't understand. So
Uh
I could
huh.
see kind of how that could be. But it
Yeah.
sounds like it's more structured in Chinese, like you said, like there are four tones. Like it's just kind of random in English, and it changes all the time too, like the slang and so it's not like
Yeah, you have to get the tone right. Otherwise, the meaning is completely different.
mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, interesting.
it's really hard. It's really difficult. Yeah, I've heard people who've studied Chinese for years,
And still
and
like
their tone is still. I'm like, yeah, your vocabulary might be good, but
tone.
my I beat the pants off of you in my tone.
Yeah, yeah,
I was born with this tone, man.
yeah.
I'm
Molded by it.
so yeah. So I think yeah, there's been a lot of like real sort of like stiff sort of political talk about like blacks and Asians and blah blah blah. We have to, you know, all this like sort of very sort of academic stuff. And did you grow up with a lot of Asian people in your life?
Actually, yes. One of my best friends is half Filipino, and other than that, I was in Dallas, so there's just a lot of Filipinos there, and I think we had a couple of Chinese students in some of the schools I went to, but I feel like it was mostly Filipino and maybe a couple, like a good amount, like Koreans.
Ah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Because we had like a Koreatown too, so yeah, so I guess that makes sense.
Oh, were you close to Koreatown over there up in
At
the
one point, yeah. 'Cause like I
uh
said, we moved around a bunch, but while I was in the suburbs, I'd say there would be like chunks of Asians, but
chunks?
it was mostly white people though. It was mostly white people, and surprise, and then like depending on what school I was at, the suburbs would also be a lot of Hispanics.
Yeah.
But I think that's just by nature of there's just a shit ton of Hispanics or Hispanic people
Uh-huh.
who are in Texas. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was pretty cool. I grew up around a good amount of Asians, mostly Asians and Africans in terms of like uh, non-white folks.
Asians and
Non-black
Africans, like Nigerians, Ugandans,
Nigerians, Ethiopians.
Ethiopians.
Hmm.
Oh,
I think
okay.
I might have Ethiopian ancestry. I'm not sure, but yeah, a lot of Ethiopians.
Why do you say that? Why do you say you might have Ethiopian ancestry? Like, how does one come
Uh,
to that conclusion?
so I went to this barber shop at one point where I was actually staying in Dallas, like the city of Dallas, for I think we were there for maybe 2 years, which for us was pretty long. And so I would go to this barbershop all the time where they had a bunch of Africans working there, and I think like two Asian women, and uh, some of the women that were working there were Ethiopian. And I always go in, they'd be like, "Hey, Et," and I was like, I don't know what that is, and I just go back about my business. Eventually, I came in, It's like, hey, ET, ET. I was like, what is ET? And he's like, oh, it's just like, oh, it's just Ethiopian because we're Ethiopian. We thought you were Ethiopian. I
Ah.
was like, I don't know, fam. Maybe it's the slavery though, so I couldn't tell you. But it was like, oh, well, you look like you might be Ethiopian. So I was like,
Oh, okay.
well, if the culture is mistaking me for one of their own, then I suppose perhaps that could be the case. And I
Yeah.
did more research, and I was looking at like the facial features and stuff. I was like, I guess we could be part Ethiopian, at least on my mom's side or something.
Mm-hmm.
But then my mom's side is all like super light skinned, so
Mm.
like you know what I mean. Like some of them are your complexion, so I'm like, I don't know what that. Yeah, I don't know what mixed around in there at one point, but you
So
know,
yeah, so yeah, my
but
complexion, is that considered light skinned, as we used to say in College Station,
yeah,
a
light
light
skinned.
skinned.
Yeah, that'd be considered. Yeah, pretty much anything that's not like pale necessarily, but clearly not black. So you're like, okay, yeah, it's kind of like light skinned. Like my mom's like light skinned, although she might be a little, depending on if she's in the sun, she actually might be a little lighter than you. But yeah,
Well,
pretty much.
well, I am dark on the arm, but if you look at my belly, you can see
Oh yeah,
my original.
yeah, yeah. She's like she can get there usually when she's not in the sun. Yeah, yeah,
um,
that's funny.
yeah, yeah, I'm permanently dark on the arms for some reason. But so what were the attitudes towards Asians, like East Asians, Southeast Asians, on the part of like African American folks up in your neck of the woods?
In my experience, it was like it, it was usually just use them to cheat off of like in school, but like straight
Are
up
you
like
serious?
being honest with you, it wasn't like what I mean. It was just kind of like I'd say that was like it was either that or it was just like you're just hanging out, whatever. Like okay, this is Steve. We play basketball together, and he's Asian. You know what I
uh,
mean? Like it wasn't really much of a thing.
uh-huh.
I'd say some people would make the stereotypical Asian jokes, but
Mm.
then usually the Asians would just make stereotypical black jokes, and it was just like
What?
yeah, but it was chill. Like I said, it wasn't. It was all because it was all in good fun. Nobody was like, "Oh my god, you just said that Asian thing," or like, "Oh, you just said a black thing." But like, it was pretty much yeah, it was pretty much a chill. And then it was also interesting because like I said, I grew up in and out of the suburbs, so this is me talking in the context of like inner city Dallas, because
Mm-hmm.
black people there weren't really many in the suburbs I went to anyway.
Wow.
So I think there was like in the school I graduated from, there's literally maybe 15 black folks out of a class of like 400 or something.
Oh, what suburb was that?
It was a Flower Mound slash
Oh,
Highland Village,
okay. Flower
Texas.
Mound. Yeah, I no, I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, Marcus High School. So it was like literally like all the during lunchtime, all the black people was just kind of like in a group. They'd be like, "Oh, yep, that's all of them. Yep." And so, but anyway, yeah. But back in the actual in the city, um, some of the Asians would kind of, which is kind of I think the norm now, and again depending on where geographically where you are, they would kind of pick up on black culture,
Mm-hmm.
and so they would start to, I guess, dialect wise, they would just sound like other black folks with like a little Asian twang on there. You know what I'm saying?
An
So
Asian. Wait, how does the Asian twang sound on the Black Texas dialect?
I can't really imitate it because it's super subtle, and I don't think you would even know if you didn't hang around a bunch of Asians as somebody who isn't Asian, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it was just somebody who maybe went to school but they didn't have like a bunch of Asian friends, they just probably think they just sound like American. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, whatever you talking that shit. Like, but you
Mm-hmm.
hang around a lot of Asians, but then you also hang around a lot of non-Asians in that demographic and out of it, then it's kind of like okay, you can just pick up on like subtle things. Same with any culture, really, whether it's Asian, Hispanic, um, Russian, like whatever it is. Like if you hang around, at least for me, if I hang around like a bunch of a specific culture, but then also a bunch of not that culture, after a while, I kind of start to hear like, okay, you sound completely American, but there's like this undertone
Mm,
because I know what your original language sounds like because I've heard it enough
mm-hmm.
and like the dialect, and so I'm like, okay,
Mm.
okay, that's pretty cool. But yeah, that's pretty much how it went with me. It was just yeah, just hanging out, making jokes sometimes. Yeah, obviously there's some people who get upset. There's some, like with anybody, some black folks just like, whoa, what you trying to say? Blah, 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 blah. You can't be making those kind of jokes. And there'd be some Asians that's like, that's actually offensive, like da, 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 da. you know. But for the most part, most folks are just kind of like either making jokes or they're just in the middle and they weren't really saying much at all. It was just like, again, oh, here's my friend. He happens to be Asian. Here's my friend. Happens to be black. Yeah, it wasn't really a big deal. I'd say there was a bigger, in terms of like animosity, there was bigger animosity between blacks and Hispanics when I was growing
Mm, mm-hmm.
up, or specifically Mexicans. But yeah, that was like the bigger beef. But that kind of got into gang stuff, honestly.
Mm, mm-hmm.
So it wasn't really like fucking Mexicans coming over here, blacks and they're lazy and I mean there's some of that stuff in there, of course, but that wasn't the impetus of it. That was just like some extra little stank to, rub in the wound.
Mm-hmm.
But
Were there Asian gangs that at that point? I mean, or
not that I ever heard of.
they may have disappeared by that. You were born in like the
91.
91,
By
and
the
it's
time I
a
got high school, yeah, it was like early 2000s. So
yeah.
yeah, I didn't really see much of a. There was some Asian like there was like some gangster esque Asian cliques and like students. You know what I'm saying? Like I do probably be somebody that that kind of thing, but not like a full ass like a actual gang affiliation thing. We might for slang call like a group of tough looking people of any culture a gang. Like, oh, that's a gang of folks right there. But yeah, it wasn't like actual like how people would associate with the Bloods. You know what I'm saying? Because that's what we had was people associated Bloods wear red all the time, and eventually you couldn't wear red. And eventually we had uniforms, and you had metal
Wow.
detectors, and you had to go to that because of the gang activity and shit like that. And,
Dang, which neighborhood were you? Did you say you were in which Oaklawn or something or?
nah, I was in most of the time I spent was in North Dallas. I mean, we go in. I think we spent like a little bit of time in near Pleasant Grove and Richardson and Garland, and but mostly it was just North. I don't know. We just call it North Dallas, but
Oh yeah.
if you know where.
There's a lot of Asians up in North
Mm-hmm.
Dallas, and all those northern suburbs.
Oh yeah, yeah. So maybe some of them that didn't get to the suburbs was probably stopped off
What were they
where we
doing?
were.
What
I don't
were
know.
yeah, I mean, was there much animosity regarding the or just negative vibe regarding the Asian-owned businesses at
I
that
would
time?
hear that sometimes from older black folks. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Every once in a while, that if a political conversation came up at the table or something, then something like that might come up as well.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that was kind of one of those. Again, that was with older people, really, but I would notice amongst people who are older than me, it would be a similar dynamic in terms of the whole, like I said, with school. We're just joking around, like whatever, make some jokes. But it seemed like it was a lot more serious between, like, say, an Asian store owner and then a older black person. And the older black person is like, yeah, fucking coming in here and open up shit in our area, and then
uh,
the Asian be like, fucking don't steal shit. You know what I mean? Like, and then I guess that's when the younger black folks might get mad is if they saw like an Asian store owner like you
right.
know thinking that they're about to steal shit, which somebody probably stole something at some point, and then that's where it gets the whole people basically just using race to kind of be like, oh, but even then again I never really saw, like, it wasn't like the Asians didn't. I never saw or heard about any of the Asian store owners like calling the cops, for instance. On
Mm-hmm.
some suspicious looking black folks. And
Oh,
I
okay.
never also really heard or saw any black folks like doing harm to any of the Asian store or like, fucking their shit up for the most part.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? So it was just kind of like a neutral, like, it was like I mean, it was kind of like it was early 2000s, but it was like the 90s, because like if you look at the media in the 90s, it was like a lot of looking back now, you'd be like, oh, like a lot of that shit would be canceled. Like a lot of just shows in the 90s would be fucking canceled.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
most definitely.
You know what I'm saying? But some of those shows reflected real life, and in real life, there was a lot of, again, like race was very apparent, and people talked about it, and it was like, again, you can make some racial joke or say some shit, that might be partially true or not true, but for the most part, you heard it. Maybe you talked some shit and then you moved on.
Hmm.
If somebody wasn't outright being like, "You fucking," or like, "You fucking," I don't know, inserts
Did you
racial slur here, for whatever.
did you hear any Asians do like that? Like,
Like say racial shit.
yeah, like you fucking N-word, blah blah blah.
No, not really. Most of the time, um, I'd say the most Asian like racism I've personally experienced would be like, um, again, kind of just like getting like looks like kind of like that kind of thing, and you kind of feel it, because I'm sure Asians feel it from maybe some black people and probably white people, and depending on where you're going, but
Like when you go into a store or something like that,
usually,
or
yeah, you go to the store, or like if it's at night or getting closer to nighttime, and
oh,
you know what I'm saying. So I'm like,
uh,
I kind of get that, and then sometimes it's like, well, I mean, it's just getting late, so maybe it's just more of you just in general anybody that's out late, kind of getting nighttime, you're like kind of cautious of. But you can see the difference when it's like you maybe a couple of white people walking by, and then only you're the one that gets the stank eye. So it's like it'd be
uh-huh.
more subtle shit like that, you know what I mean? But yeah, I never got any outright um yeah,
Just
any
like
outright just
verbal
like
hate.
verbal hate, yeah, or even physical action of hate. Yeah, for the most part, that's what it was for me. I think now, in terms of like any kind of black versus Asian stuff like that, my personal opinion is I think it's like partially the media, which like the same black people, I'll put it this way, like the same black people that would be like, oh my god, yeah, fucking Asians and committing violence and shit like that are gonna be the same white people that would, you know what I'm saying, for
Hmm.
whatever reason. I mean, it's the
Hmm.
same mindset of ignorance, quite frankly, in specifically from the black point of view. I would imagine, to give those people the benefit of the doubt, I
Hmm.
would say that if they beat some older age, because I've seen those videos like beating some older Asian dude, just minding his own business or something like that.
Hmm.
Probably because they're being fed, well, quite frankly, I'm not going to say Trump, because it's not really just him, it's really more of just the media in general, but he definitely pushed the whole COVID,
Hmm.
it came from Asia and da 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 da, which like the Wuhan Han lab leak or whatever, like if you look into it, I mean, it's not really that like their sides try to be like, oh, it's all China's fault, and this is why, because it came from here. And there are people like China had nothing to do with it. The truth of the matter is, if you go back to where the like things were being made. I'm not like an expert on this, but if I remember, if you go back to where the viruses were being made, Fauci and all these people were asked like, oh, was there any work being done on man-made viruses, essentially, which is just used to then try to prevent those or more dangerous violent viruses? It's just
Hmm.
science, you know what I'm saying? It's just kind of more murky side of science, but the intention sometimes being good. I think the intention, because pharmaceutical companies obviously is just to make money, but outside of that influence, in theory, it's like, yeah, you work on a virus or you try to synthesize one, because if you can synthesize one, you should be able to understand a new one much easier. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's like if you could create life, we would know so much more about how we exist just right now. But currently, we're still kind of like, can't quite create everything about life yet. So
Well,
it's
yeah,
like,
yeah. I think you would agree that whether it came out of a lab or not, yeah, people shouldn't be blamed
You
because they
can't.
happen to be the same ethnicity.
Exactly. That's the issue. It's like that lab could have been in Russia. I'm sure that actually, I think they do have labs in Russia and in other places. It just so happened that the one that leaked out happened to be in China. And so people hear that on the news from, again, Trump was pushing that. And then he kind of really leaned into the whole, like, it's fucking Chinese. So then you get black folks. And then also, like, more rural white folks as well
Uh-huh.
committing acts of violence against Asians.
Mm-hmm.
And again, those same people would be the ones who would pretty much absorb anything from the media, which
Mm-hmm.
is partially their fault, but it's also partially like it sucks because it's like, again, a lot of people, you got fucking, I'm trying to put food on the table. I'm trying to feed my kids. I'm trying to, now I'm assuming somebody's trying to feed their kids isn't going around just beating the shit out of, you know what I mean? Like, that kind of stuff. But the point being that most people are distracted by other things to really like, critically think and then be like, do I need to actually trust everything that's on the media? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Even if you say you didn't want to put the onus on, again, a political party, Trump or nothing like that, just there are some people who are simply ignorant, and if they hear, oh, virus came from China, must be Chinese people, fuck y'all, type thing. And then combine that with which, again, going back to like the older black people, might see some issues sometimes with the different Asians and vice versa. You go back to um, the whole Asian opening up stores and stuff in the black community, and yada 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 yada. So I think it's
Mm-hmm.
like a mix of both of those things, and then some people who are just, quite frankly, unhinged and a little ignorant. Those are the ones usually committing those acts of, you know, violence and stuff like that. Because, like all those, you say black people are committing the most of those acts of violence, or if that's the statistic. I don't know what the
It, it
statistic is, but
it looks bad.
it
Let's
looks
just let's just
bad.
say it
You
looks
know what I'm saying? It looks
bad.
bad. If that's the case, still, even out of those people, that's not most black folks. You know what I'm
Oh,
saying?
absolutely, yeah.
Just like vice versa, like
Exactly,
it's
yeah.
not most Asian people who are going around, at least in my experience, going around being like secretly racist to black folks or anything like that. It's like, no, in my experience, most blacks, Mexicans, and then other Hispanics and Asians or Latinos, whatever, generally kind of on the same page, at least for me. And that might be a generational thing as well.
Mm-hmm.
I can honestly see that. That could also be a very big part of it because, from what I've heard, um, it can get very prejudicial if, like, a black person goes to China or a lot of different places in Asia. Um, you
Mm-hmm.
know, but a big part of that is just simply a lack of having interacted with black people, and all you have is the media, the American media, because
Mm-hmm.
that's the most popular media in the world. It's most consumed, even if it's censored, heavily censored, say in China or whatever, and depending on what it is. If all you're seeing is athletes and thugs, then that's all you know. Like, if you show me a pit bull and I don't know anything else about pit bulls, and all I see are just pit bulls biting people and like being aggressive and all this kind of shit, that's all I'm really gonna think that a pit bull is if I don't like decide to do my due diligence and like really research and but
So,
again, I think that's generational because I've also heard that younger folks and younger Asians, there's a cool, I gotta look it up again, but there's this cool YouTuber, he's an Asian YouTuber, and he'll go around and ask different Asians about their opinions on like
mm-hmm.
different American topics, but a lot of it, half the time, is like black people and stuff like that. And it's
It's
like,
not Asian Boss, is it?
might be Asian boss,
Oh,
might
okay.
be Asian
All
boss,
right. So he asks Asians about all
different,
sorts of things.
all sorts of things, and usually the younger folks are kind of like, "Ooh." Or if they do say something ignorant, and then he'll be like, explain more, and he'll be like, well, this is like this because X Y Z. And I'm like, oh, wow, really? You know what I mean? So it's just like it's ignorance in the sense of not like in a negative connotation, like you're being ignorant. It's just you simply like I am ignorant of how the fucking liver works. I couldn't tell you. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So
Well,
it's yeah.
I mean, just from my experience, um, I as far as like Asians are, Asians. I'm over 50 years old, and so I've spoken to a lot of Asians about all sorts of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
especially politics and stuff like that. And it, as far as I can tell, from the people that I speak to, like Asians rarely ever talk about black people. It's like it's it's they talk about Americans
Yeah,
and foreigners. Like
yeah. I was gonna say yeah, because you get into that too. It's like even white people, they might be like just because they're foreign, but it's just you might not get just certain stereotypes aren't stuck to them. So but yeah,
right, right. It is it's a lot of times it has to do with like, well, this is how they do stuff, and this is how we do stuff, and it's kind of like the comedians these days. Like half the jokes these days are about like this is the way black people do things, and this is the way white people do
oh yeah,
things.
the
And this...
classic like comic view, like when you see when black people walk, white people walk down the street, they all like, white when black people walk down the street, we're like, yeah. That classic hacky comic type of shit. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, that was definitely one of my. I mean, your sort of impression, kind of your joking impression, kind of makes me think about like my early sort of understanding of African Americans, you know, and I didn't really have a conception of blackness or black people probably up until high school, probably because
I mean, why would you?
we just
Like,
never we
yeah,
didn't talk about that, and we didn't. I mean, it was just like I knew that there were kids that were white and some kids were black and so on and so forth, um, but my original my some of my early thoughts were just like I want to be with those kids who are laughing a lot, you know, and
yeah.
having fun.
Pretty much. That's how it was in my school. It's like, yeah, you just having fun, and then either he's a group of Asian kids laughing, or more often than not, a group. I mean, it's mostly black at the school, so you just see a shit ton of black folks laughing, and then they'll kind of. Oh, that's another interesting thing. Like, it's actually now that you say it like that, I'm like, I guess black people don't really. We didn't really talk about Asians either. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't. It was mostly about white people. Like if we're gonna talk about something, like it's usually like, oh yeah, white people doing this, doing that. But yeah, most of the time, if we did, it was because of anime.
Anime, yeah.
So that's another thing. I grew up in a generation where we were literally raised. Well, not everybody, because when I was in high school and stuff, it wasn't cool to be into anime or whatever, or at least admit that you were into it. Like you might watch one show, you might watch like Dragon Ball Z, and it's cool to maybe bring that up, but you can't really be a fan or
Right.
you're a nerd, whatever. But yeah, I grew up. It was just like it was the very beginning of uh, anime in the West in terms of like becoming like a somewhat of a mainstream thing. I still say it's not quite as mainstream as other things now, but it's way more. I judge things on how mainstream they are that are in terms of like alternative lifestyle or nerdy stuff based on how chill just a typical basic girl is about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So like Marvel used to be again another nerdy thing like comic books and stuff like ew,
Yeah.
you're
Oh, I was a Marvel zombie.
you
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? Same, yeah, same. But then now you can get some basic blonde or whatever girl, and she's like, "Oh my god, I love Thor." You know what I mean? Like, I've been loving Thor. You know nothing of the son of Odin. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I say thee nay.
I say that, yeah. But yeah, it was the same thing with anime. It was like that was when Toonami, this thing Toonami came. Did you ever watch Toonami?
I didn't.
Probably, yeah. We're a little bit past that, but uh, late '90s, '97 to '98, Toonami came out, and that was on Cartoon Network, which is just a cartoon channel, and what they would do is around like 10:30, 10:30. It was also mixed with this thing called Adult Swim, and that's where you got like
Oh yeah.
you probably know at least Adult Swim, yeah. And so they would show some anime, and then at the very late night they would show Adult Swim. But when they showed the anime, that was called Toonami, and they had this animated robot guy in a spaceship, basically just being your guide to anime. Named Tom, and he's just like, "Hey, welcome back," and then he'll be like, "Let's watch some more Dragon Ball Z." What's going to happen this time? I mean, that kind of thing. And that got a lot of black kids into anime and quite frankly the
Huh.
Asian culture. Is basically like the resurgence of the kung fu flicks.
Oh.
So you remember back in the 70s, you had all the kung fu flicks, and there was like kung fu craze, karate craze. Everybody loved, all that stuff, which was cool at the time, but then of course quickly turned into like a stereotype or whatever. But before it became a stereotype, it was just like, yeah, Bruce Lee came through, showed everybody like a little bit more Asian culture, got everybody cool with like the kung fu and all that stuff, started making movies off of it. And then you have a lot of like my uncles and stuff like that, super into that kind of stuff.
Mm.
And they have Asian friends that I would say is probably influenced by the fact that they just were really into kung fu movies and shit like that.
Thank you, Bruce.
All right, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, he was that dude. He was a goat for a reason, not just the martial arts of it. But so it's like a resurgence of that, but just in a different form. So now it's anime, and so we're watching all this stuff. And what they did was at Toonami, they love these Japanese cartoons, the anime, because they would watch them on cassette tapes, the creators of it, and they also love hip hop. And mind you, these are white dudes. I think it's like 2 white dudes and maybe 1 black dude at the time. And so they're all super hardcore hip hop heads. And so what they did was they would mix it together. And so in between Tom be like introducing the stuff, they'd be playing like some, some old school hip hop or something like that, or some a little bit of contemporary stuff. And he'd be like, yeah, so this is, da 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 da, while the hip hop's playing in the background, and they're showing like little clips and scenes from to, kind of cue up the next show that's going on, and they'll edit it to the beat of the music.
Oh.
You know what I'm saying? So then it's like, Papa, I am the stone in it. It's like Goku, doing a blast, or somebody doing some, whatever, while like some hip. And we fucking love that shit. So it was like a perfect combination. And so you have black kids and kids at the time and teens eventually, like already falling in love with Asian culture. And then vice versa, you also had a lot of Asian kids falling in love with black culture because they were already into that shit, like the anime part of things. Like, oh, this is nothing new to us, but this hip hop shit is, and vice versa. And so then by the time I got to high school, that's when I get fast forward. You get a lot of those Asian kids, like I said, who were basically Blasians. You know what I'm saying? Like they're walking and talking like black or whatever. And then you also had a lot of otaku kids, black kids, usually the more nerdy side, going around and maybe trying to dress a little bit Asian or what they think is, what I mean? Not like nothing crazy like a, fucking hat or just, I mean? Nothing.
No conical hats.
Yeah. None of the super stereotype shit. Just more of like, wearing a bunch of anime merch, or like, you could YouTube or Google like current Asian fashion, and they'll go out and try to, get that stuff.
That stuff must have been like more Japanese or Korean.
Yeah, specifically stuff. Japanese and Korean. Yeah, it wasn't much Chinese influence there, besides the kung fu, like I said, because the anime would use a lot of Chinese culture in the way of kung fu, because that was like a basis for a lot of anime characters fighting and stuff. Unless they were a samurai or something, then that'd just be straight Japanese. You know what I mean? But so yeah, so it was like a little hodgepodge of everything. And I mean, that was my experience, at least. Like I said, I was still considered like weird or nerdy or whatever. So obviously not all. I can't really speak for all black folks, but
did the Asian kids sort of get some good good karma, or like the image of the Asian kids, they changed because of their association with black kids?
Oh yeah, I'm sure because because like I said, if you don't really know about different cultures like Asians, you don't really know about black folks, it's like you just don't think about it. It was the same thing. But yeah, the more you had like Asian kids, especially honestly the non-nerdy Asian kids hanging out with the non-nerdy black kids, just the more generalist type of folks, yeah, I could see them, because like we had popular Asian kids, put it that way. We had popular Asian kids like that girls wanted to get with type thing that were not Asian. You know what I mean? Like, ooh, I want to get with fucking Tony. He fucking fine. I mean, that kind of thing. And he'd be walking around like, with like, the black swag, but then he's still got his, Asian subtleties about him. Yeah.
I don't, yeah, I definitely didn't feel like that happened at our high school. Like, I think pretty much all the Asian kids at our high school were considered either nerds or cool nerds.
Yeah, we had that too. I'd say that's probably how it was mostly through like middle school for me. It was like that's pretty much how it was through like middle school, and then slowly started to morph in high school because, like I said, anime get a little older and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, so now, granted, when I went to the suburbs, it wasn't necessarily like that because again, there weren't any black people around. So
Mm,
why would there be Asian people who are, you know, not imitating, but like influenced by black culture type shit?
mm-hmm.
So it was, I'd say it was probably yeah closer to that. When I went to the suburbs, it was more of oh yeah, he's Asian, he's either a nerd or maybe a cool nerd. Um, Although there were some cool like popular Asian kids there as well.
Yeah,
Usually
I
they
would
were
imagine.
involved in sports though, I think, from what I remember.
Hmm.
So it was one of those like basically cliques transcending whatever your ethnicity is, more or less. It's like if you're popular, if you're part of the popular group, you're part of the popular group type shit. Um, but I would also, I will say when I went to the suburbs, it was like, I don't know, there's a lot more fake. I don't like the suburbs, honestly. It's just a lot more, it was a lot more fake. Like
Uh-huh.
I would hear or be hanging around like a group of, because I kind of just hung out with everybody, and I might hear like, uh, maybe we're all chilling, and maybe I happen to be chilling with some of the popular people at the time, maybe at a party or something, and maybe one of the popular Asian kids is there, but then like turn around and those same other friends that they were with will start, maybe they might talk some shit or something based
Mm,
off of like Asian stuff,
mm,
or they'll like jokingly say some racial stuff or whatever, woo woo, but then the Asian person won't necessarily say anything back to the like the white person that says something to them, you know,
uh,
and then
s-
later on they'll also say something else that's like, okay, so you were serious, like, because you're still talking about this while he's not here, and you know what I mean, like, whereas again, like back in the black school, the people who would make those kind of jokes, it was just like very open and like make a joke about you, you make a joke about me, cool, we eating lunch, like you know what I mean, like talking. We called it roasting. That's the thing. I think maybe that's the
yeah,
difference. It's
we
like
used to call it capping,
yeah,
capping on
Captain.
each other,
Yeah,
on each
yeah,
other.
we would cap and roast and shit like that. And so that was like that was just you just roasting on every fucking body.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, you got one leg, I'm roasting you for having one leg. Like you know what I'm saying, like that kind of thing. But
It didn't get very racial, I think, in College Station, because I hung out with a lot of black kids, especially starting around junior year.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, it yeah, I definitely didn't do anything racial with the other black kids. Maybe my friend Mario would crack something with me privately every once in a while. Like he would say like, why do Asian people wear the covering on the side of the sunglasses? And he'd be like, to cover the slant. I'd be like, ah, yeah, that's really funny.
Yeah, 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 shit like that. You know what I mean? Like so, but yeah, it seemed like it was just a lot more. I don't know, just I don't want to say insidious, but yeah, when I got to the suburbs, it was just faker. I don't
Let
know.
me ask you this: were the Asian kids? Because I know in the '90s it started getting popular, or getting yeah, started getting popular for a lot of kids to just to use the N word, like even if you weren't black.
Oh yeah,
Like I would see Hispanic kids like using the N word,
yeah,
like just to anybody, right? I mean, like not in a racist way,
yeah. They'll
but
literally just be like, "Yeah, nigga, you crazy?" Like, yeah, yeah. No, that was a thing.
would the Asian kids use that word too, or
The ones who were more influenced by black culture, yeah,
wow,
sometimes.
yeah,
But again, that's we didn't really give a shit because the way we saw it was like, yeah, you've had to suffer too, essentially, without saying it. But I mean, that's really what it gets down to is like we've all every ethnicity, um, beside well, technically, yeah, if you count like lower class white people, like poor whites, every ethnicity and then poor whites have been like shat on in some way by
Mhm.
America, while being in America. You know what I mean?
Right, right.
Different degrees, obviously, but to some extent. And that's kind of, I think, whether it's said or it's just a subconscious thing. I think that's kind of why you kind of have that, so to speak, like clearance amongst a lot of black folks. Now, don't get me wrong.
No,
Again, a lot of black
I
folks, I say half black folks are like, I don't like anybody saying any of that shit,
right, right.
including black people. Like, you know, what I mean,
I think
nobody should say any of that
that's more
shit.
popular
Why
now.
should, yeah,
Yeah,
um,
like black people have gotten a lot more cautious about using and tolerating
yeah,
that
all that
word.
kind of shit. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So it's just kind of like, yeah, just But at the time, yeah, I think that was kind of like maybe perhaps that could have been the impetus behind it. Because yeah, like if you heard again, it's usually like the more influence. It's like a weird unspoken thing. Like if you saw, which I never heard, but if you saw, say, like a nerdy Asian person saying it, then I'm pretty sure people would get uncomfortable with it. You know what I'm saying? But then again, I never heard or even heard of any of those type of Asian people doing that.
Right.
But if it was like, Tony, whatever, with the J's on and shit, you know what I mean? Like he was like, yeah, nigga, you crazy, like, da 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 da. Wasn't really a big deal. And honestly, the darker you were, the less big of a deal that it seemed to be.
Right.
So
right.
I think that's why the Hispanics got so used to, because we probably for a while as a collective, we're just kind of like, no,
they're kind of brown. And
yeah, y'all brown, like whatever, bro. Like, y'all didn't do slave. And that's another thing is like y'all weren't involved in the shit. You know what I mean? Kind of deal. But
yeah,
that did happen. And I don't know.
I felt it was like a badge of honor for me. I felt like to be called the N word.
Yeah,
I felt like, oh, these are my people right here.
Yeah, you're friendly. Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, yeah, it's like, yeah, okay, yeah, they see me as a friend. I mean, because that's the way the term was kind of morphed into. It was like, you could be like, yeah, that's my nigga, like that's a good thing, and then but you could be like, I ain't no nigga, like that's a bad thing. You know what I mean? So it's just like the tonal thing. It just kind of depends on the context in which you're saying it.
All right, man. When we got to stop.
Oh yeah, about to.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, well, I don't know. I'm thanking you. We're doing this together.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Yeah, let's